Muscle memory and a shrug the way a concertmaster will toss off a warm-up arpeggio, but the reward is real when you do it right with the casual adroitness that approximates instinct that looks both graceful and aggressive, leaving you, the plate umpire, properly possessed of the authority and dignity of your office. Naturally, for a beginner, it is a harder trick to perform than it sounds, and for me, a 52-year-old student umpire, it was the first of many skills that looked simple and proved annoyingly resistant to mastery. During school drills, I'd get it right a couple of times, then let my concentration slip, undoubtedly because of something else to focus on. I'd come out from behind the plate to follow the path of an outfield fly ball or to straddle the third base line to judge a line drive fair or foul, pull off the mask, and my hat would end up on the ground, usually smack dab on the baseline, so it was marked with a telltale streak of lime, or merely jostled and tipped crooked, the bill off center like a rapper's, or tipped forward and shading my eyes. How you can pull your mask upward and have your hat tipped forward, I don't know, but that it is possible, I am a witness. It wasn't until school was done and I went out on the field to work an actual game, and my frustration continued, that I solved the problem for good, or at least thought I did, by buying a hat with a narrower brim. Who knew different-sized baseball cap rims even existed? It turns out, however, that an ordinary baseball cap has a brim about 3 1/4 inches wide with 8 seams sewn into it. The brim of a base umpire's cap is a little bit narrower, maybe 3 inches and 6 seams wide, and the brim of an ordinary plate umpire's hat, which is what we were issued in school, is narrower still, 2 1/2 inches and 4 seams. The gradations downward continue until you get to a kind of skull cap with a 1 1/2 inch brim that has the shape of an appetizer portion of cantaloupe. Umpires call this version the beanie. When you remove your mask, it makes you look like a refugee from the 19th century. But I like the eccentricity of it, and I bought one. Umpires, however, cannot afford eccentricity. Later, I would discover a scene in the popular film A League of Their Own in which the actor Tom Hanks, playing a manager, accosts an umpire wearing the beanie. "Did anyone ever tell you you look like a penis with that little hat on?" he says. But I wasn't aware of this at the time, and the first game I wore it, I noticed teenage players giggling at me behind their hands. Whenever I made a call one of them didn't care for, he rolled his eyes and gave me a look. A geek. Immediately after the game, I went back to the store and bought a new hat, this one with a 2 inch brim, and when I came back the next day to work a game in the same league, I had much more authority in the eyes of the players, or so it seemed to me, which is really all that mattered. At this point, perhaps you were thinking, okay, taking off the mask, enough already. This is far too much detail about a mundane thing, and that's correct, except that the process I just described is a perfect analog of learning to be an umpire. You master the fundamentals, you cast them off when they don't serve, and in the end, you accommodate yourself to the game and its participants. It turns out you're not alone out there. It only feels that way. That was the beginning of umpire school. Now I'm going to read to you the end of umpire school. What you need to know is that the last 2 weeks of umpire school, after if you've gone through all the classes and the drills on the field, they put you through what they call camp games, which are simulated games in which you go out on the field and you try to work actual situations that are set up by the instructors, who are all professional umpires themselves. There's a full team out there, either your fellow students or the other instructors, and they set up these situations in which you're supposed to work. And they set up these wild plays in which you're supposed to call balks, or the ball rolls under the fence, or all of the wild stuff that might happen to you, but that rarely ever does. But they want to see how you handle things. And then no matter what you call, whether you handle it right or whether you handle things properly or improperly, somebody posing as a coach or a manager comes out to argue with you because they want to see how you're going to handle yourself in an argument. And so the umpire school is basically a cross between, say, auto mechanic school and acting school. Camp game experience wasn't so bad, or at least it could have been worse. I'd learned a few things, and many of an umpire's fundamental responsibilities had made their way into my muscle memory. Long last, it had become second nature for me as the plate umpire, with a man on first, to cover third base on a base hit to the outfield. As the base umpire, I'd gotten better, if not yet good, at finding the precise angle and distance for a throw to first base, and I disciplined myself to keep my chest facing the ball, even on a line drive to the outfield, runners careening around the bases, and every instinct that I had misinforming me followed. In my second camp game, I correctly invoked the intentionally dropped ball rule. In my third camp game, I recognized a tricky time play, meaning that with runners on first and third and one out, the batter grounded to the the first baseman who stepped on the bag, recording the second out and removing the forced play at second. So when the throw was made to second, the runner reversed his field and headed back to first, where the tag was made to complete a double play. It was also the third out of an inning. Before the tag, however, the runner from third had crossed the plate, and properly I counted the run. My satisfaction at these small triumphs was, of course, mitigated by calamities. Once with the bases empty, lined up behind first, I was too slow to decide whether to follow a line drive into the outfield or to come into the infield, and I ended up colliding with the batter as he rounded first base and tried to stretch his hit into a double. In the same half inning, I called consecutive balks on a pitcher for not coming to a full stop in the stretch position. If I hadn't been paying attention, he'd been using the same motion for half a dozen pitches before I made the call, and anyway, he could probably and anyway, his motion with an infinitesimal stop was probably legal anyway. Anyway, it went like that. Sometimes I felt in control of the game, sometimes not, which means, of course, I never was. In the camp games, I got a glimpse of the umpire's job from the inside, and from that perspective recognized for the first time what a mass of contradictory qualities is required. Suddenly, I understood how crucial it was to be both relaxed and vigilant, to be both rigid enough not to shirk any responsibilities and flexible enough to adjust when a play took an unexpected turn, to know the rules backward and forward so as to be prepared for anything they cover, and yet be ready to extemporize when the rule book falls prescriptively short. To actually see and register what's in front of you and simultaneously anticipate the immediate future, to be confident enough to hold the balance of the game in your hand and humble enough to avoid deciding it, to hold firm opinions and to keep your mouth shut. Remember, baseball is just a game, and to take it very seriously. I understood, too, that as the umpire, you are neither inside the game as the players are, nor outside it among the fans, but that the game passes through you like rainwater through a filter, and that your job is to influence it for the better, to strain out the impurities, to make it cleaner, fairer, and more transparent without impeding it, corrupting it, changing its course, or making it taste funny. On the last day of school, I had my last camp game, and you need to know about Sarge. Sarge was the 70-year-old former minor league umpire who was Jim Evans' second in command. And Sarge took me aside before my stint as a base umpire, and he told me he was going to go overboard and he was going to bump me during an argument. Why he felt it necessary to warn me about this, I'm not sure. Probably because he didn't take me all that seriously, and maybe he was afraid I'd take offense to such overt aggression, or that I'd think he was trying to embarrass me in front of everybody. This would have been consistent with Sarge's personality. He couldn't have been more sweet-tempered off the field or more military on it. I love you, you know that, he'd say. But then if you lined up in the wrong position or turned your back carelessly on the ball, he could get ridiculously angry, as though you'd wandered too close to a landmine and endangered the lives of your platoon. Whatever the reason, when the moment happened, it was so weirdly, confusingly real that I had the experience that I've heard actors talk about when they're on stage and the script suddenly dissolves and they're up there having an actual conversation and not acting at all. The catalyst was a double play ball grounded to the shortstop, who threw to the second baseman, who bobbled the throw and dropped it during the pivot.